we're potentially going to go after the areas in which these centrifuges are located, more heavy hits could be coming. We know, based on reports, that the president is considering targeting other infrastructure as well. Are we closer to the beginning of this renewed operation against Iran than we are to the end?
We're somewhere in the middle. So the big challenge right now is that neither the United States nor Iran look to be seeking any off-ramp for negotiations or diplomacy, even though they're both paying lip service to the idea that negotiations are still on the table. But the past 2 days of strikes have actually been expanding in scope and scale way beyond just pure military targets. Both the United States in Iran expanding to electrical grids, railways, bridges, roads, etc., and the Iranians responding in kind across the Gulf, desalination plants, civilian hotels, other civilian infrastructure. So right now, the aperture of this war is really widening. Those strikes that President Trump is talking about would be a massive military operation with the kinds of assets we don't actually have in the Middle East right now. So it would be a really significant ramp up.
So you think, Dana, and it's good to have you back with us, that references to a 10-day ceasefire, maybe another round of indirect talks, this is all happy talk coming from both sides?
Right now, I think both sides are paying lip service to the notion of a ceasefire, and we do have the mediators, the Pakistanis and the Qataris, really trying to de-escalate because, as President Trump said earlier today, the United States can do this for days. They could do it for weeks even. The challenge is really the math on two other parts of this. The first is our partners across the Middle East. Do they have enough interceptors and defenses to protect their societies, their civilian infrastructure, their people against the onslaught of Iranian missile and drone attacks? And does the United States have enough munitions and missile defense interceptors to sustain what we're doing? And the second big factor here is the global economy, energy prices, et cetera, which are going up. And there, we're not only talking about the closures in the Strait of Hormuz, we now have those Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen threatening to impose a blockade on Saudi Arabia. And we also have the Ukrainians picking up their strikes against Russian oil refineries in Russia. All of that together is not great for the global economy, for energy prices, and especially for U.S. affordability right before midterms. So whose pain point comes first? The ones globally, the ones in the Middle East, or the Iranian pain point?
Well, Dana, you've said a few important things there. One, the suggestion that we need to be able to maintain our own defenses, let alone our Gulf allies be able to maintain their defenses too. But you also, in your previous answer, suggested that the kind of strikes the president may be alluding to would require assets that we do not currently have in the Middle East. Do we have access to all of the things we need? What would you be watching for to potentially be surged to this region to signal whether or not the president is serious about this?
What the president is talking about are reports that the Iranians have an underground enrichment facility under Pickaxe Mountain, which is inside Iran. So these are one of those deeply buried, hardened facilities under mountains. And it's going to look like what we saw last year in 2025 during the 12-day war, which was largely an Israeli military operation, and U.S. B-2 bombers came in with a very specific kind of heavy ordnance penetrator to penetrate deep underneath those mountains and destroy facilities. Pickaxe Mountain is a different piece of business. So those B-2s can come from the United States. We certainly have them in the U.S. military arsenal, but it's a different kind of operation.
It's a different kind of operation, and the president was trying to draw a line there, Dana, which is interesting. We've talked a lot about getting the highly enriched uranium out of the country. That would be its own type of operation with excavators and as many as 15,000 troops, we understand, plus force protection in the air. He's talking about empty centrifuges, which he says are not as big a deal. Would this be as sensitive an operation, or do you just have to blast it to smithereens?
First of all, whenever we're talking about these kinds of operations, they're incredibly serious. And what we know is that any military operation on its own is not going to completely eliminate Iran's nuclear program. We were told that it was eliminated last year. Of course, we're still talking about it this year. We know that a lot of it has been obliterated, but we have President Trump talking about nuclear dust. we could just watch this for a while. Certainly, U.S. ground forces going into Iran and removing all of that enriched uranium is a significant high casualty kind of operation. Whether he's talking about that one day or another airstrike on another day, either way, it's a serious piece of business. But what we're really fighting about right now is control over the Strait of Hormuz. And there, despite 10 days of consecutive U.S. military strikes, we know that the Iranians still have the will and the capability to continue to threaten freedom of navigation.
Well, so if it is a contest of wills and a contest of time, perhaps the president was asked, Dana, about this in the Oval Office, if he thinks Iran is specifically trying to use the Strait of Hormuz politically ahead of the midterms. The president said it wouldn't impact his decision making. He said it wouldn't impact me, but it is a question all the same. We were told yesterday on Balance of Power by retired General Ben Hodges that he thinks we could still be mired in this by the time November comes around. And I wonder if you agree.
I do. So the challenge with the Strait of Hormuz is that there was freedom of navigation and the free flow of commerce before this war. Historically, both Republican and Democratic administrations have focused on Iran's nuclear program, Iran's missile program, and Iran's cultivation of a terrorist network across the Middle East. And those were the reasons that President Trump said we were going to war in February, and this idea of collapsing the regime because the regime is committed to this strategy of destabilizing the entire Middle East. And now the surviving remnants of the Iranian regime have found a more potent instrument than the nuclear program, the missiles, or the terrorism, and that's being able to threaten or shut down freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. And now that they've seen what leverage that provides them, it's hard to see them backing off or anyone ever returning to the status quo ante. So what this war has done is delivered us on the precipice of a new navigational order. Right now, it's whether Trump is going to concede that the Iranians get to control it, or whether the United States is going to be able to reimpose its will on the Strait of Hormuz. But when Trump talks about imposing tolls or service fees, that undermines this general premise of a global commons where there's free flow of commerce. Either way, this is just a terribly dangerous situation, and we're not going to have it resolved in a couple days or a couple weeks.